So at this stage of the game, we want to start the file. Now, the file that you want to use, the correct ones, there is a whole slew of these, a class set. These are underneath the buffers on the buffing cart and the belt sanders. So this file here is a single cut file, and this is meant for steel. There's a couple different types within the shop, but as long as you grab a red wooden handled file, it's the correct file for the job. So first thing we're going to do is file out the machine marks. As we file the machine marks out, we want to make sure we square this thing up. So the proper way to hold a file, one hand at the bottom, the other hand is going to be at the top. Okay, we're going to set our file on top of the work. We don't want to put crazy pressure down on it. We want to let the file do the cutting. But we want to have control of the file. We don't want to go like this here and wiggle that file or start to round as we're filing it. Remember, we want to take and keep this thing square. So, one hand at the bottom, one hand at the top. Nice light pressure. You start to slide that file across. Now, you are cutting on the forward motion of the file. On the forward pass, you're cutting. So, continue to make those forward passes. As I make my forward pass, I'm kind of going a little bit of an angle. I'm lifting the file up, restarting back to this beginning position, and then moving forward again. So, I'm going to continue. Now, after about 10 passes, what I'm going to do is take and flip my file over, because this side needs cleaned. This side has a bunch of metal shavings and things like that in it. So we're going to flip the other side, and we're going to continue to file. Now, we'll do roughly 10 more. And I'm going to show you what this looks like now. Flip my camera here, maybe. So I'm flipping. Now you can see the area that I'm cutting. You can see where the machine marks are, and you can see where the machine marks are disappearing. So we need to keep continuing to file and work those machine marks out. Okay, now I made roughly 10 passes with each side. I'm going to take my file brush or my file card. I'm going to clean this file out, get all those shavings out. Okay, very important as you continue to file. If you do not, the metal shavings will stay inside of here. Well, if you scratch this project and cause you more problems. So about 10 passes, maybe a dozen passes. Flip the file over, do those passes. Then I want you to stop for a quick minute, clean the file out, and continue. Okay? I'm going to continue to file here. We'll see you back in just a minute once these machine marks are out. All right, folks, so we have our ends cleaned up. We have our machine marks out of those, saw marks. What we're going to do next is remove what's called the mill scale from the outside of this piece of material. We want to do our layout on here, but we want to be able to see that layout. So we want to get rid of that mill scale. The easiest way to do that is to take your file. We're going to lay this flat on the table. We're going to take our project, lay it just right down on the side, and we're going to take and move that back and forth. So let's get an initial picture here. You can see that it looks, you can see that mill scale on there. And let's try a different file. That one's a little rough. Just going to move this back and forth. Okay, you can see it's starting to cut through there. Okay, we'll continue to do this, and I'll jump back in just a minute once I have the mill scale off, and we will lay this thing out. Once it's laid out, we'll show you how to cut it, okay? In regards to the layout, I would normally have used a scratch awl and a combination square to lay this out. I'm going to use a marker so you folks can see this a little bit easier. That'll make laying this out just a little bit more simple. So if you remember from the drawing yesterday, if we look at the board, we want to lay our hammerhead into 3 sections. So I'm first going to set my combination square to 1 inch. Now, we got to cut the material out. We do cut it 1/4 inch longer. We cut that material roughly 3 1/4. And that way, when we're filing and cleaning up the ends, if we take it less than, we don't want to take it less than 3 inches. So what we'll do is mark our 1 inch first, and we'll do this all the way around. So you're going to hold your combination square to the outside of your material and make those marks. We are next going to do the same exact thing. on the opposite end. So just like we did it, rotate. And this is roughly, I would say 3 1/8 or so. It's still maybe 3 3/16. It's okay to leave this long. I'm okay with that, if that's the case. Okay, so we have our sections laid out there. Next thing we're gonna do is lay out the nose of the hammer. So let's, we're gonna set our combination square once again. And for this part, what we can do is set our combination square to 3/8 of an inch, measure from the outside of the combination square. What that's going to do is give us 1/4 in the center. Okay, so our line looks like that. And next, we're going to connect from those points to the outside edge of our project. Now, once we get that laid out, we also want to lay that out on the back side of the project, because when we go to cut this thing, those lines will be shared from both sides. So let's do the same exact thing on the other side. Okay, 3/8 from the edge, 3/8 from the edge. Okay, same on the opposite side. Now we'll probably begin to cut this thing. We could lay out the back and start with that, but we'll probably cut both sides of this first, and then we'll transition to the back side. Now, one thing I do want to do is, where my lines are, I'm going to connect those from one side to the other. And what that's going to do is give me an idea of where I'm going to start my saw when we get to cut this thing. So, put line up top here, rotate on the other side, just the same. And that's our line on the top looks like. So the next step is cutting this thing. Now, the biggest complaint that I hear is, Mr. Marie, this can be a lot of cutting, a lot of work by hand, and that's sort of the point. For the first project, I'd like to do a lot of hand tools, and that way we have full appreciation for the power tools. Second thing, this is actually a little too small to cut on any saw in the shop. Our fingers are going to get too close to the saw blade, and also trying to get that pitch or that angle is going to be difficult. So I'm going to take my hammerhead, we're going to set this up in a vise. We're going to take and make our angle, our cut angle, straight up and down, and that's going to put our hammerhead on an angle. Now when I take my hacksaw to cut this thing, I can grab my hacksaw and I can keep my hacksaw square and cut straight down. Okay? So this is tightened up. We'll be back in just 1 second and we'll start to cut this. At this stage of the game, we're ready to cut. So workpiece is in the vise, cut line is straight up and down, our hammerhead's on an angle. We're just going to take a regular hacksaw and we're going to cut the side off. So probably going to break a sweat during this, but it is what it is. Should take you 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes to cut that side off. You are cutting 1-inch thick steel, so it is a difficult cut. It's just more labor intensive. So we're going to take our hacksaw, we're going to put that on our line or next to our line. We'll get our thumb, put it right next to where we're going to cut, and we're going to let that blade ride against our thumb. Now we're going to pull our hacksaw back a handful of times here to start a groove. Not yet. Okay, we're going to get a nice groove started before we start going on a forward motion. And what that's going to do is ensure that our saw has a good place to start. So when I go to hold the saw, I'm going to take my finger, put it along the top frame here, easy hand grip, and I'm going to put my left hand on the top of the saw. Now, when you go to cut this, we don't want to do a lot of downward pressure. We want to let the saw do the work. So, go ahead and continue to start to cut. The left hand is pretty much just to help keep the saw square. Okay? So I'm going to keep my saw on a pretty decent angle to start with. Once we get deeper in the material, we're going to take the saw, we're going to start to move that forward. And start cutting all the way across. Now, normally I'd end the video and I'd continue to cut, but I want you folks to see how long it takes to cut. It can move at a nice, even pace. I get a lot of complaints. It takes kids several days to cut this. So we're going to show you how to do it live here. That way there's no complaints. There's nothing in the class I'd ever ask you to do that I wouldn't do myself. So I'm going to start to dip the saw forward a little bit. And I'm actually, once I get my saw cutting all the way across, I'm going to dip the front of the saw down now. Whoops, sorry. And we're going to continue to cut. As you dip the saw forward, I'd also poke a look over and make sure that you are staying on the line on the front side of this thing. So as I continue to cut, we're just going to continue to dip the blade back and forth. What that's going to do is kind of keep our blade straight. So if we dip back and cut, and then we dip forward and cut, that's going to give that blade somewhere to go. That'll help our cut stay nice. And just so you folks know, that was not a brand new blade in the saw. Just when I grabbed out of the tool cupboard. Okay, we'll check on our marks here. Wipe the sweat off my brow. Okay, definitely better than halfway through here. I'd say we're about 2/3. Now, we're getting pretty close to the end here. Commonly, I'll see kids take a screwdriver, we'll try and put it inside of there, pry that end off. Please do not do that. You'll break the tip of the screwdriver off. Ooh, that's a little toasty. And we don't want to break the tools. So continue to cut and the side will fall off here. Whoop, there it is. Okay? Now, do not grab that wedge with your fingers. That thing's hot. Grab a pair of channel locks here. So that's what our wedge looks like that we just cut off the side. Now I save these. I don't throw these out. Reason being, I'll take that, and if our hammers come loose up top, we'll use that wedge. Okay, we'll loosen this up, and you can see where our cut is. Okay, we're next to the line. We're not on the line. Just in case it was to go off a little bit, we can start to cut from the other side and go from there. Okay, so what I'm going to do next, I'm going to cut the other side. I'm not going to make you watch me. You watch me for 6 minutes, cut a side. 7 minutes. I will cut the other side, and we'll meet you back here. Okay, so we got both sides of the hammerhead cut. I'll show this to you. And the next step, the next thing I'm going to do is take and I'll file this down. So, the most efficient way to file this is to put your hammerhead inside the vise, and we're going to put that on a little bit of an angle again. We're going to continue with the red handled file, take a file brush, and we're going to clean this thing out, and we'll start to file the hammerhead. Now, I like to go on a little bit of a diagonal angle here, and we're simply just going to continue to make passes. So for this, we're doing two things. First off, we need to take this down to our layout lines, and we also need to get rid of all those machine marks on there. I wouldn't say machine marks, they're hacksaw marks. So I'm going to continue to file this and get those marks out. Now, if you didn't cut to the line, or if you cut way off the line, you're going to have quite a bit of filing to do. So as you go to cut this thing, take your time with it, don't rush. And it will go well. Sometimes I get a little excited here when I'm doing this, and I don't clean out my file. You want to go roughly 10, 12 passes, and then clean it. So really, we'll count them out next time. We'll stay on that a little bit more, okay? There's 12. There's another 12. Now, let's show you what this looks like so you can see where we're going. So right now, if we take a look, you can see those machine marks are starting to go away, our cut marks, and we're also starting to get down closer to the line, okay? So you can see that side there we haven't done anything with, a lot of saw marks in it. And the other side, you can see we're starting to get rid of those, okay? We do a little extra filing on this. I was a little further away from the line than I probably wanted to be, but it's better to do that than have a regular cut. So let's say we screwed the cut up and we had to fill it in with some weld or something like that. That's an option. We don't want to create too much work if we don't have to. Cleaning that file out. Now, as we're cleaning the file out and around the vise, there's a lot of small metal shavings here. I'll grab them with my finger. Just going to run my finger across, and you can see what they look like. Okay, big mistake people do in here, and it causes a lot of problems. They'll touch the table, they'll rub their eyes. If you get those metal shavings or particles in your eyes, it's going to create a lot of problems. Okay, so please don't do that. Please be cognizant of that as you're working in the shop. You want to wear safety glasses for this part so you don't stick your finger in your eye. You're welcome to do that. I just prefer not to do it. Not that there's metal shaving flying everywhere. This is all handwork. Definitely something to keep an eyeball on. Okay, we're just about to the point where our machine marks are gone. Probably the next set of passes here, we'll get rid of those. I'll show you what that looks like, and you'll then see we just need to go back to our finish up to our profile. And I don't know if you can hear as I'm filing, I'm picking up the file between every pass. I'm not just running it back and forth flat. Give you a quick peek on this here so you can see what it looks like. Compared to last time, you can see there was quite a bit of saw marks. Now there's only a couple in there, so we're getting down to our line here, or we're just, I wouldn't say down to the line, but we're getting to where all our machine marks or our saw marks are cut out of there. So I'm going to continue to file this. We'll see you back in just a couple minutes when we have this side 100% complete.